Good to go, Bobby.
Great. Welcome, everybody. It is very, very, very nice to see all these great faces.
Bobby, you're just on mute. Sorry.
Take two. Hello, everybody. I'll start again. It is very nice to see all your beautiful faces. My name is Bobby Marleb. I'm the co-founder of Mental Walks with Adina Jacobs. Before we get started today, I'd like to acknowledge that we are all on the land of the First Peoples across Australia, and to pay our deepest respect to their elders past, present and future. Today, we are delighted to be presenting a conversation series on the art of communication in business. The conversation series was started by us at the beginning of last year when COVID started hitting us, and we started asking the question, what topics can we bring to our community that's going to help them navigate these really difficult and ever-changing times? And the series has been so successful that we've kept it going and will keep it going. And it's also a way for our fantastic mentors and mentees in our community to be able to share their knowledge for everyone's benefit. So today we will be hearing from Leanne Elich. Leanne has a really unusual background. She is a doctor that became a paediatric oncologist. That's a cancer specialist for children. And in her career, she became obsessed about the way patients were being treated, and in particular in her field about the way radiation was being delivered to patients. And one day she was tapped on the shoulder by a headhunter representing a medical device company. And she took the opportunity after 10 years in medicine to face her career towards business and medical technologies to see where she could make the most change, particularly with what is the best outcome for the patient, or in the case of business, for the customer. She also became obsessed with what is broadly the art of interaction and human psychology, and how is it that people interact, and how do you influence people, what is the art of sales, and all those other things that are so important in business. And now, after 20 years in very senior roles in global medical technology companies, 3 years ago, she changed to focus on consulting in that area. So I'm delighted to introduce her to you today to talk about the art of communication in business. She will talk for about 45 minutes. I strongly encourage you to put your questions in the chat. And at the end of her presentation, we'll be going through those questions and hoping to answer as many as we can. This, as you know, is being recorded, and it will be available on YouTube for any of those who would like to see it again or recommend it to people you know. And before I hand over to Leanne, I also just want to invite you all to our regular Mental Walks events. For those in lockdown states, they've all gone virtual, and they're in person in the states where we're able to walk. And we also are running virtual walks nationally every 2 months that are attracting women from all over Australia, and again, our extraordinary mentors. So without much further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce Leanne Elich. Over to you, Leanne.
You're good to go.
Thank you very much. I'm just sharing my screen. Make sure everybody can see me. How are we looking? Oh, good. Excellent. Thank you so much, Bobby and the team at Mentor Walks. Thank you for that great introduction, and also thank you for having me on the conversation series. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to also say hi to everybody, and thank you for taking the time to come and listen. It's nice to meet you all. I wish we could see you in person, but not to be, unfortunately, and maybe one day I'll get to meet you all. So, the art of communication in business. in fact, the art of communication in general, to be honest, we're going to be talking quite a lot about communication in business, but to be able to perfect that and be able to resonate with the person that you're talking to within a business environment or professional environment, we need to understand communication altogether as a single entity. So what is communication all about? So is it just a mumbo jumbo of words? Is it phrases, sentences? Do we talk? We listen? What actually is it? What resonates with one person that may also resonate with someone else, but may not with someone else? So what's really important is that we get an understanding of the way we communicate, how we communicate, and how important it is to communicate. So before I go into the depths of communication, I just wanted to start with something a little bit fun. It's very, very short. So it's just a little message from a couple of friends of mine. Waiting for my friends. Whoops. I think we've got the death spin. It's a real shame. So basically what this is a claymation. So I use a lot of claymation in my presentations, which gives, let's see if we get going with my friends. So as my little guy said, it is difficult. Quite often when you're trying to communicate, it is like walking into a maze, trying to find the right words, sentences, phrases. And it's really important that we understand one another to be able to do that. So how do we communicate? And there's lots, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. It's lots of different ways. And this is something that I just sort of a brain dump of what we tend to do and what I generally do also. So obviously by phone, we talk on the phone. Video at the moment, so important. We're using video, we're using cameras. We are not present in each other's presence. So it's really important to understand how we communicate with one another. Video is something we do need to perfect now. Email, we're constantly emailing, texting, instant messaging, direct messaging, social media. There's all these platforms that we can communicate. And some are actually conflicting because when we look at an environment, we go and we look at face-to-face. Now that's just a perfect environment for communication. Being able to sit somewhere with someone, being able to identify the way that they're responding, the way their subliminal cues, looking at their body language, which is really important also. Nothing beats face-to-face, but unfortunately, in the circumstances that we're in now, we are communicating a lot virtually. And it's really hard to be able to mimic what we do in the real world of face-to-face on screen. But there are certain things we can do, which I will show you and teach you, that we can encourage ourselves and our colleagues to do to be able to communicate in a more palatable, more invigorating environment than just looking at a screen or a camera. We use our voice to talk. We use our ears to listen. But what we also need to do is communicate with our eyes. I'm very, very animated, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and that's a natural thing for me. But I find, communicating with your eyes, understanding what someone is saying, means that you really are listening to what they have to say. It's important for them to see that you're respecting their opinion, you're expecting what they're saying, you're expecting their knowledge and their value. And you can do that through your eyes and body language. We communicate with our body. So whether we're animated, we use our hands, we nod our head, we shrug our shoulders. The other thing with body language is even in a virtual world, so when we're on the screen, is moving our body weight forward and back. And that depends on a different type of person or personality trait that we'll come to soon. But people quite often will lean forward, or those will actually lean back. And the interpretation of that can actually be quite significant, especially in a virtual world. More when you're sitting down having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or talking to someone in a meeting, the rocking backwards and forwards, or the moving from side to side, which we tend to do when we present, it's not as significant as when you're on screen. So I want to tell you a story. I want to start with a little story. And it's something I get asked all the time, and it's because of my diverse background, and Bobby just explained, and the things that I've done, things that I do, and things that I want to achieve. And people just want to know what I do and what my thoughts are. And so they'll ask me, what do you do for work? And other than the obvious of what I do, I actually say, I love what I do. I talk to people every single day. It's the best. Talking and communicating, it is just one of those, I'm just trying to think of the word, one of those traits, one of those, in a way, talents to be able to communicate and connect with someone, build relationships, which is just so important, especially in the business world. So here's me, I'm talking with a colleague. It's actually one of my girlfriends are having a cup of tea, and we're just sitting down and we were actually talking business. So how do I feel? So I feel connected. I want to have that significant connection with the person that I'm talking to, especially in a professional sense. If I'm in a meeting, if I'm in a board meeting, if I'm in a sales meeting, if I'm in a strategic meeting, a marketing meeting, I need to feel that connection. I want to be understood. So I want someone to really listen, again, using their eyes, really listen to what I have to say. And I want to feel that what I'm saying makes a difference. So how do I do that? But that's how I want to feel. And I want to be happy. Yeah, most of the conversations we have and the way we talk, it does bring us joy. Communication is fantastic. Yeah, there's some communication that's not great, but you'll always find out something new and you're always learning. So for me, I want to be happy. What do I want? I want to build a relationship. So in a business sense, I want to build a relationship with someone now, and I don't want it to last 5 seconds. I don't want it to last 5 minutes. I want it to last for a long, long time. I want a sustainable long-term business relationship. I want to create influence. So I want to influence or politely persuade someone to think the way I'm thinking, to understand my point of view, to understand my values and my core values, and vice versa. That's reciprocated. And it's important to be able to make an impact on someone and an outcome. I want an outcome. So whether it's a business outcome, whether it's a contract signed, a proposal signed, or a next meeting, or schedule a phone call or a friendship, I want an outcome. But also, it's not all about me. So it's not just my story. It's actually, this is Kerry. It's actually Kerry's story too. So how does she feel and what does she want? That's really, really important. The key ingredient for this resonating communication, this impactful, powerful communication, is empathy. And the word empathy does get thrown around a lot, but basically when we make decisions, we actually use emotion and logic. That's two things. We want to solve a problem, or we want to be happy, or we want something to bring us joy. So emotion has a lot to do with communication. Empathy is the key. So empathy refers to understanding someone's motivations, desires, and communication style, and using that information to treat them the way they want to be treated. Not the way we want to be treated, they want to be treated, because we're talking to them. As I said in the previous slide, this is how I felt, but how did Kerry want to feel? So rather than treating people like just another row on the spreadsheet, or another phone number, or another email, or another person on the list, empathy requires a more personalized approach to communication. Remember, motivations, desires, and communication style. That is vitally important to successful communication. So what's the problem? Now, what's happening here? Why can't we just communicate and get what we want, get the responses we want? Why is it a little bit difficult? And to be honest, it actually is quite difficult, because for us, we want to communicate in the way that's natural. So we default to a certain style of communication. If we're an extrovert, we'll talk loud, we want to take over, we're full of life. If we're an introvert, we a bit more reserved and reclusive, and we stay back and quite often get trodden on, don't get to say the things that we want to say. But that's what's natural. But what's natural for us may not be natural for someone else, and it may not be the same way that they want to be communicated to. And in fact, they may not even understand the way that you're communicating with them. So we need to get out of that habit of just doing what's natural. We all have a tendency to assume that everyone else wants to communicate in the same way we do. And that's natural, because I'm having a great day, or I'm happy, or and I'm an animated, loud person. Well, I just think the next person's going to be like that too. And obviously I don't, but quite often that's what we think. This makes me happy. This has made me successful. It's going to be the same for them. But neuroscience, psychology, and just real life experiences, show us and tell us that that couldn't be further from the truth. One thing also is we are getting bombarded. It's an explosion of electronic communication at the moment that seems to just be targeted, automated. There's no feeling, there's no empathy. So we're starting to run out of patience in a way, because we're not being targeted in the way that we want to be targeted. We underestimate the importance of personality traits, absolutely. And that's something that we need to learn and we need to identify. Time and attention. So we're running out of time, we're busy. Our time's been taken up, our attention is very scarce now, because there is so much. We're becoming even more skeptical, because we're so hyper connected, and this is especially in the electronic world. What's worthy of my attention? What's worthy of my time? It has to be something that resonates with me, otherwise it's just another email, it's just another conversation, or it's just another person trying to sell something. We need to take the salesy out of sales. And the one way we do that, and a powerful way we do that, is through communication. And we need to concentrate on, we tend to concentrate on the business thing rather than the personal thing or the people thing. So when we go into a meeting, or we go into a presentation, or we go into a pitch, or even just a catch up with girlfriends, we concentrate on the outcome, the business thing of where we want to be. We don't actually think about the person and how I want to treat the person to get the outcome I want. So it's really important that we use that emotion and empathy, and we understand people. The business thing, that will follow naturally once we understand the people thing. So how do we communicate better? What skills or what tools or tricks can we use or have up our sleeve to be able to understand someone better, so we can get the communication right every single time? So to help people improve their communication skills, build stronger relationships, and there's a whole lot more that we do as well, we use 3 very effective frameworks. And these are evidence-based frameworks. I've used a lot of frameworks in my time. And you've got to remember, back in the day when I was clinical, I had to communicate with patients, had to communicate quite often very bad news. Very, very bad news. I mean, I dealt with cancer patients, so you can only imagine, and children. So there's a certain way to be able to communicate that and understanding a person. So there's lots of frameworks out there. There are some that just don't do what they're supposed to do and are very blinkered. But the 3 I love and use, and we use on a daily basis, is the DISC. So the DISC framework, which is actually about the framework or the methodology of DISC is actually about 2,000 years old. So it's been around for a long time. We use personality mapping and we use archetypes. Now, the 3 sound quite complicated. They're not at all. There's lots of depth to them. We won't be talking about all that today. There's also another stem of archetypes too, but we'll go through the basic and then look at the holistic view of how we use these 3 tools and resources to communicate better and build those successful business relationships, those successful friendships, and sustainability. So meet DISC. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have heard of DISC. Quite often when I do introduce someone to DISC, they haven't heard of it. I understand that they haven't heard of it. And some people have heard it or may even use it. DISC gives you the tools to better identify how someone thinks, acts, and prefers to communicate. So it's almost working with the subconscious. You get to understand someone's personality in a way that you can then adapt your behavior to connect almost in like a perfect world. So DISC is classified into 4 categories. You can see here, I'm just going to use my blue cursor. So we've got DISC, which is DISC. D is for dominance, I is for influence, S is for steadiness, and C is for compliance. And amongst each of these 4 quadrants, there are certain personality traits and certain behavioral patterns that each of them assert, and each of them need to be understanding. Some of them are conflicting, and some of them are very synchronous. So it's a way to understand how we need to communicate in a world with lots of people with different personality preferences. So just looking quickly, if we look at the vertical axis too, we've got active and reflective. That's also the interaction between our environment. So are we really active in our environment? Do we look around and we're really aware? Or are we reflective and a little bit more reserved, and we reflect on what's around us and have a deeper understanding? So on the vertical scale, the D and the I are very active, and the S and the C are very reflective. On the horizontal axis, we have task focus and people focus. So the way we interact with people, whether we're more task oriented than people oriented, and vice versa. So with your dominance and your compliance, very, very task oriented, want to get the job done, problem solvers. The I and the S are the people who are influential and steady are more people focused. They're more emotional, actually. And I don't mean emotional as in emotional and sensitive, as in they've got more emotion, they've got more empathy. So they can actually communicate on a totally different level. However, there's compromises for all 4. So let's identify our 4 quadrants. And I've got some pictures up here that you can relate to, and you'll probably go, oh yeah, for sure. So that's identified dominance. So someone who is dominant comes across as aggressive, blunt, demanding, extremely impatient. They'll tend to interrupt others, no doubt, and actually have no problem doing so. They're very results oriented. They're pragmatic. They don't want any rubbish. Just give me the 1-pager. Let's just get on with it. They focus on the big picture. They're not really interested in detail at all. They state their own opinion as facts, and they make decisions quickly and with firmness. Now, sometimes not always the right decision, but they will not procrastinate over anything. And I've got here Donald Trump. Now, the one thing I wanted to say is that being a dominant person doesn't mean you're a bully, although Trump excluded, but doesn't mean you're a bully, doesn't mean that you're bossy, doesn't mean that you're rude or impolite, just that you have the tendency to behave in these ways. Donald Trump, absolutely. And then we've got Kent Brockfield from The Simpsons, who is the anchor, the newsreader. And you can even see by him pointing his finger, I want you, I've got, you are you. So it's very much in your face and very forceful. So that is D, dominance. Influence. How do we identify influence, an influential person? I don't mean an influencer. Obviously, Taylor Swift is an influencer, but she is an absolute scoring influencer, as in the disc influence. People who have influence traits, or the influencing traits, they talk a lot. They're very animated. You can probably guess what I am. They're very enthusiastic. They're open and friendly. They want a very comfortable environment. They want to make other people comfortable too. They're cheerful, outgoing. They jump from subject to subject. So have you ever spoken to someone, and I do this all the time, where you'll be talking with them, having a conversation, all of a sudden they go off on a tangent, and then they'll come back, go, what were we talking about? That's what an I does. That's a personality trait of an I. They talk about people he or she knows. So not in the terms of I know so-and-so and look at me. It's more collective. They like to include people. They're very hospitable. So they talk a lot in the we environment rather than the I environment of a dominant person. They may make decisions spontaneously. Absolutely. I want that handbag. Okay, next 5 minutes, I've got it. That's what I want. We tend to not think about it. We use colors a lot more. We use fonts. We use creativity as well. And in the Jungian archetypes, which is another set of archetypes which we're not talking about today, and that's a whole nother presentation, colors and fonts and patterns come into this as well. They're very easy, relaxed manner when interacting. They want to be comfortable and make others comfortable. And they're comfortable with physical contact, absolutely. And despite my Greek heritage, and we're very touchy-feely, that we will say, hey, how are you going? And kiss, or how are you feeling? Put a hand on the shoulder, hand on an elbow. They're okay with physical contact. Obviously not at the moment. It's actually killing us, to be honest, but that we are comfortable with that. It actually is a comfort thing, but we feel that everyone else wants to be like that. Now, Taylor Swift is fantastic. I mean, she was able to influence a whole lot of rock stars and celebrities to join her on stage during her 1989 world tour a couple of years ago that she won all these Grammys for. Unbelievable. Now, regardless of the commercial or financial gain, the fact that all these people wanted to then be part of her group or her posse just goes to show what kind of person she is. And of course, Bart Simpson is one of the big mega influencers. Steadiness. So we're going into the bottom right of the quadrant S. So we've got Princess Diana and Marge. Absolutely. Very, very steady. So steady people are easygoing. They're calm and patient. They listen. They're really, really good listeners. And they don't just hear, they really listen. They're thoughtful. They're very emotional. They nod and go along. They don't want to be rude. So they'll actually, even if they don't understand something, they'll quite often just nod and go along with it. And with S, people, quite often they have a question that they want to ask. And when I've done workshops, you can see them wanting to ask a question, but they don't want to disrupt the cadence of the meeting, or they don't want to have focus on them, but they really do want to ask a question because they're listening and they have questions to ask. They like their own physical space. So they're quite comfortable just being alone, enjoying time out and about by themselves. They don't really like people encroaching too much, but a little bit, but not too much. They don't get easily excited at all. In fact, sometimes with S's, it's almost like they're bored or they're not interested, but that's not the case at all. It's just that they are a very steady and calm personality. They ask questions and inquire about specifics. They are not as analytical as a C, but they do like detail. Their attention to detail is excellent. And they will ask questions if they are in a safe environment. So if they're in an environment where there's lots of extroverts, they won't. But if they feel like they're in a psychological safe environment, in a comfortable environment, they will, because they want their questions answered. They ponder alternatives. So they'll think of alternatives. What about if we do this instead? Have you thought about this? They're really good brainstorming. They might drive you nuts because they're quiet, and you really want them to come out with these fabulous ideas because they have such great ideas. Why didn't you say that 10 minutes ago? But they're really, really good. They're slow in making decisions. So they're not going in the shop and buying the handbag. This is the handbag they've wanted for ages. So now they've decided that they want to look around, have a bit more of a browse, have a bit more of a think. Maybe I'll come back tomorrow. So that's what S's are like. And they like a harmonious environment. C, compliance. Einstein and Lisa Simpson. Very, very objective, analytical, fact-driven. Data. That's what compliance people or compliant people love. They are very skeptical. Very skeptical. They focus on the details. Now, with me, when I was working in the clinic, we had medical physicists. Most, I'm going to say all, that's generalizing, but most of the medical physicists were C's, because they had to be, because they were doing all the quality control and quality assurance to make sure that when I deliver radiation to my patients, I know what dose of radiation they're getting. So they have to be skeptical and go, well, let's double check, let's triple check. They want facts, they want evidence, they have to focus on detail. So engineering, anything that's structural, where they can be very mathematical and physics driven, people are quite often very, very high C's. They proceed cautiously, absolutely, problem solvers. They are not comfortable whatsoever in physical contact. I don't know if you've ever noticed that if you're talking to someone and they pull away, that happens with a C. Now, me being a high I, so I'm actually a high I and a D, I have to make sure that I step back when I talk to a C, that I move my body weight backwards rather than forwards. I lower the volume of my voice. I generally speak slower as well. Very, very straightforward and structured, because if I go on and have my hands waving and move around and talk like this and that's just too much, and there just is no there's no engagement whatsoever. They're very reserved in groups. They make decisions only after studying the facts. So not only have they not bought the handbag and then thought about it, but they then come back and study the fabric. Will this fray? What's the hardware like? What are the chances of the lock failing? Will the handle come off? So they actually go a whole nother step further. And they may be very critical, and quite often they are. They feel that they need to be. Sorry, guys. Okay, so meet personality mapping. So within DISC, so we all have a primary and a secondary DISC type. So like I was saying, for me, I am a high I and I'm also a D. I do have a little bit of C, and I need to, because of what I do now, and obviously my past with being compliant with delivering high energy x-rays or radiation. So there's a certain amount of compliance, and I'm actually a bit of a stigma for data and analytics. But an S, there's not much S in me. We all have a little bit, we have a bit of everything, but we have two more dominant or primary and secondary traits, and then we have a little sprinkle of the other two generally. But within the DISC quadrants, we have 16 distinctive personalities or archetypes. So imagine these are the quadrants. So I've got the vertical axis here and the horizontal axis here, and this is D. We've coded it red. So as we go along the wheel, around the wheel, if we go in a clockwise direction, we go from these archetype or names, just it doesn't matter about those, but what we're doing is looking at the change within the D to the I. So as we go to the latter side of the D and we get to the, or I can say proximal and distal side of the I, in here is where they'll show a crossover of some D personality traits and I personality traits. Then we become super duper I, and then we start reducing the net amount of I, or we get to an even state. of equilibrium with the I and the S, and then our S starts taking over. As we keep going, we're really, really steady. Then we're steady, but we're starting to become compliant. And then we're super duper compliant. And then we go back to, as we start again, we're compliant, but we are also dominant. Now, each of these in their own right have their own personality traits, which we're not going into today. We're going to concentrate on the main 4 groups, main 4 quadrants. But it is really interesting and a fascinating topic, which I love, going into the archetypal work of understanding people and the psychology behind it all. So how do we communicate with a D? So I've just identified what a dominant person is like, a person who is an influencer, a steady person, and a compliant person. So how do we communicate with them? So I've listed 5 types of communication or scenarios that we find ourselves in at least every single day for some of these. And what do we do? So conversations, meetings, emails, feedback, conflict. So with a D, when you're having a conversation with a D, you need to be direct and straightforward, using confidence and assertiveness. So there's no fluff. There's no beating around the bush. There's no, let me tell you a story. It's straight to the point. If you have a meeting, which we're getting to in a minute, where you're providing value and a transfer of knowledge, the biggest mistake you can make with a D is provide a ream of paper of information, or an entire clinical trial, or an entire manual. They're going to look at it and go, what am I supposed to do with this? Can you just summarize this in 1 page? So they just want that. Not saying that they are excluding the important facts, absolutely not. What they want is the important facts, and only those. So when you're having the conversation, that's what you need to concentrate on. Also, you can lean forward. So stepping back, they'll actually step towards you if you step back. So being direct, being confident. Someone who is steady can it can be a little bit problematic for them when they're communicating with a D. So this is a skill that they need to work on once they understand how they need to communicate with a D. Meetings, brief, to the point, and only schedule when necessary. So we seem to be having so many meetings. A D will actually complain and say, do we really need to have this? Or can we put these 2 meetings together? Can we combine the agendas? Didn't we talk about this last time? So we need to be very, very concise. Emails, going on email, brief, business-like, concise. So straight to the point. Again, no fluff. Quite often I'll say, good morning, good afternoon. But often I won't even say, how are you, or how have you been? The reason for my email is, or the reason I'm contacting you is, they don't want that. They haven't got time for that. They actually don't feel that is good use of their time. So now, I'm not saying being rude and being really pushy and use brute force, with a lot of people do, and go in with kill, especially with salespeople. Not at all. But you just need to be concise, and not paragraphs and paragraphs. Couple of sentences, that's it. Feedback, direct, actionable, and focused on the most important points. So again, if you say, look, you did this okay, and this was all right, but you could improve on this. What do I need to improve on, and what have I done okay? That's it. You can go into more of an explanation, but you don't need to sugarcoat it like you do need to with eyes, for instance, which we'll get to in a minute. They will handle the straight directness of feedback. Conflict, they actually engage and really enjoy conflict, Ds, because they see it as providing an outcome. They see it as that it's essential for improvement. As long as it's actionable, there's a point to it, then bring it on. So not that I'm saying it's an argument or it's heated, but healthy debate is really good for a D. And also they love being challenged. So if you can get into sort of a challenging debate that is very very professional, with lots of knowledge, not too much fluff, but lots of information to the point, they will engage that kind of conversation. Eyes, So remember, I's are talkative, are very animated. They want to be comfortable, the life of the party. Conversation with an I, they project a casual tone. They use humor and personal anecdotes a lot. And they describe past events with colourful language. So even with me, I will use words like, oh, you'll get yourself into a kerfuffle, or chop chop lemon drop, or wowza, or yikes. Now, obviously not in a business context, but I will use very descriptive, animated, and colourful language that people laugh at, and I enjoy when people laugh because it makes them happy. So this is the way that I'm not saying that they like meetings that are not serious. Absolutely, in a business sense they need to be serious, but not as formal. They will loosen up a meeting if it does actually end up being a super duper formal meeting. Having a whole lot of eyes in a meeting, we will get nowhere, because a whole lot of eyes will just talk one another, and they will have a half an hour meeting schedule that will take 2.5 hours and still haven't achieved anything. So you've got to throw some D's and some S's and C's in to be able to get them to stay on track. Meetings done in person without a rigid agenda. So absolutely need to be done in person. Eyes are people. They love that, the physical contact. They want to engage. They want to create a fun environment. They want to really, really connect. Eyes tend to really look at people. They do use their eyes and body language when they're communicating. It's really important to them. So obviously it's tricky now virtual. So with the virtual world, it's that body forward, faster pace speaking, volume up, animation, getting them really engaged. Emails, friendly, casual, and personal. So this is when you can say and use, hi, Leanne, how are you? How have you been? Or I hope you're keeping well during lockdown. I love that. Any kind of it gives a sense of personality and feeling. And, it's not just another email. I actually really do care. So using that kind of language. Feedback. Focus on a high level and delivered with encouragement. So always, when you are giving feedback to an I, always provide positive feedback as well as a negative feedback. Never just give the negative feedback. They will actually take it personally. So eyes need to be given, you've done this really well. What we need to improve on is this, and this could be done a little bit better, but what you did great, or what I was really impressed with was this. You'll get more engagement, and they're more likely to actually listen to that negative feedback once they have been given a bit of positivity. Conflict should be addressed in a balanced and intentional way to avoid unnecessary arguing. Now, the reason I put that in is because eyes take things personally. So they say, but they will come back and say, things like that. But what I meant was, or, you've misunderstood me. And then it goes round and round and round and round in circles. So it needs to be balanced. It needs to be, an intentional way of explaining or, coming to terms with something when you're talking about conflict. But there has to be someone that says, okay, enough's enough, because an I will never, ever do that. They will go round in circles. So you need to take the emotion and any kind of blame out of conflict for an I. S, conversations with an S. Someone who is steady. You need to use calm, agreeable, warm tone, and be very considerate of feelings. Ask questions to understand where there may be concerns. So S's absolutely will take things to heart. S's also need space. They need time to think. They need to sit down and have a conversation. They like to engage with people, but in a more harmonious and a more even environment, rather than the go of the I or the push of the D. So they will ask questions. They also like to be asked questions, not in a big group, but when you're having just a conversation or a small meeting, and even a business meeting, they quite often come up with really, really good ideas. Meetings done in person where possible. S's do struggle in virtually, and it's very easy for S's to get lost. I'm purposely running my workshops now in a smaller group in case I have S's, which I generally assess beforehand anyway, because I don't want them to get lost. I want them to be to interact. I want them to learn as much as the D's and the I's. The C's are sort of like the S's as well. So it's really important that, you know, we do interact with S's as much as we can on a very, very sort of face-to-face level, but on a more comfortable and comforting level. Emails, warm, sincere, and expressive. So even though their attention to detail is exceptional, they do like that warmth because they have a lot of emotion. They are very good with the empathy ingredient. They don't want to be taken for granted. They quite often can be, and they feel vulnerable. So it's important to keep things sincere and asking them how they are. They really enjoy that. Feedback, thoughtfully explain and deliver with empathy. Now, if anyone is going to get upset or there be tears in a meeting, it will be an S, because they do take it to heart, and they quite often miss exactly what you're trying to say because they have tried their best. Everything's been steady. Everything's been even. All of a sudden, you've thrown a spanner in the works, and it's very hard for them to understand that. So it has to be thoughtful. There has to be a different way of delivering, as you will with an I and with a D, and definitely with empathy. Conflict, handle with caution. Absolutely. It can escalate very quickly and result in hurt feelings. And again, when we have the tears and we have that, not misunderstanding, there's quite a lot of misunderstanding with S's in terms of conflict. Besides, they do not like conflict or handle conflict very well. They will push back. But if they are involved, it almost feels like a personal attack for them. Of course, it's not, but that's how they feel. So you need to be very, very thoughtful when in a situation of conflict. And C, compliance. So conversations, serious, business-like demeanor. Ask strictly objective questions to fully understand what they are thinking. So no mucking around. Get to the point, but they love detail. So I could sit down with a C and ask them to explain the inner mechanics of a certain machinery, and they will sit there for an hour quite happily and talk about that and the replacement time and the mechanics of it, what needs to be done to service it and who was involved and what the outcomes were. And they did the test 3 times, and then they thought they probably should do it another 3 because they weren't really happy with the results, and the water tank wasn't showing the curve properly, or it was sort of more exponential than parabolic, all this kind of stuff. They will happily talk, but the details. So you've got to be really careful about what you do ask. And then if you interrupt them, you've got to be careful how you do that too, because then it's like, well, why don't you want to know these details? They're important. So you need to engage with them in a business-like manner, and also to stop the conversation in a business-like manner. Meetings, minimal, again, like D. Do we really need this? Can't we put these together? We talked about this. Formally scheduled, absolutely. They will want a detailed agenda. A D doesn't want a detailed agenda, and a C absolutely wants a detailed agenda, even to every 5-10 minutes. The more detail there is, even if the agenda was 10 pages long, they would love that. That's what a C likes. The more detail, the more structure you can provide, the better. Emails, clear, detailed, and factual. Absolutely no fluff. Never, ever, not that you should lie to anyone, but never, ever lie to a C. They will find you out because they will investigate. They will find it immediately if you're actually telling the truth. If they're skeptical, they're very, very skeptical. Feedback, specific, detailed, and delivered with logical reasoning. So if you're explaining something, there has to be a reason why, and it has to be interpreted in a logical way for them. You can't just be, well, someone said, who's someone, that you haven't done this as well. Well, what did I do? So it has to be specific, has to be very, almost like they want to own it, and they really want to know details. They actually can't tolerate the frayed edges. It has to be very geometric, very sharp. Conflict should be viewed objectively. to bring underlying issues to the surface, as long as emotions come out of it, are kept out of it. Now, when you have conflict with the C, they will bring up the study or the conversation that you had 5 years ago. And they'll try and prove their point or justify what they're trying to say, their point or their opinion. They will bring up details and facts from the last millennia if they have to. So it's important that when something is addressed in terms of conflict, that the actual problem is then brought to the surface. Otherwise, it will go round and round in circles and get quite emotional. So it's important to understand that even though they are analytical and they're very data driven, that they are also, there is also a sense of emotion with a C. They are very, very proud of their work and what they achieve. So what are the outcomes by communicating? So for us, now that we've identified and we know how to communicate with each of the quadrants, we can now adjust our behavior and adjust our communication. So I gave you some examples of what to do with the D and how to talk with an I, how to pull back with an S and how to stand still with it with a C. And that's really important, because if we don't resonate in a business sense, we'll never, ever get an outcome. So what are the outcomes by doing all this? We become more confident because we have been able to connect a lot more deeply. We feel that, oh, they're really listening to me, or the person on the other side, that they actually really understand me. I want to have another conversation with them. I want to actually do business with them. It accelerates trust, absolutely, exponentially, actually, because in the world we live in now, very few people, unfortunately, take the time to use this kind of behavior or communication or understanding of personality traits, which is why we get the automated templates, the automated this, the same old, because people aren't putting the time. They're all rushed, I understand, but people aren't putting the time to understand one another. As soon as I receive an email, think about it yourself. You receive an email, it's like, oh, actually, there's something there that really resonates with me, or they've taken the time to learn a little bit more about me. I want to talk to them again. I trust them. I trust them because they actually care about me and care about this conversation. You have a longer, more engaging conversation. So I'm not even talking about length of time of a single conversation. I'm talking about long-term conversations going on for years and years and years. I've got clients that I have met many years ago, that 20 years ago, that we've got great working relationship and we've got great friendship as well. And that's because I understand what they like, what they know, what they like, and how they want to be treated. Now, quite a lot of them are nothing like me at all, but I understand that. And I've sort of taught them what I'm like too over time. We've built that trust and that care. So those long-term relationships, those business relationships that you want, will continue. You build stronger, more successful relationships. So your business doesn't just come to an end because they don't understand me anymore. They want to continue working with you on a personal or professional level. There's this, there's an emotional or the connection, the connection of empathy as well. And that is, we're missing that now. We really are. So now is the time to really engage in this kind of communication, because people have pushed it to the side, and especially with wearing masks also, we want to be able to express ourselves because we're hidden behind, obviously not on Zoom, but when we're out and about, we are hidden behind something that doesn't allow us to express ourselves normally. And it's really important we connect on a much deeper level. We become much more influential. So quite often you become a thought leader, you become the go-to person or the expert, because you really understand, and that foundational relationship you have built. I'll go and ask Leanne that, because she understood what happened last time. She understands how we think. She understands our business model. She understands how we operate. She understands our values, our core values, what we're trying to achieve, what our outcomes are. So they'll tend to just keep coming back, because you've taken the time not to just understand the superficial level, but understand the way to communicate with them on a deep level. Increases email responses, return calls, follow-up meetings. This one I love, because we are ambushed with an explosion of electronic communication at the moment, and it's not even just at the moment, it's always, and that's not going to stop. You know, what do we tend to first? You know, how do we divide our time? How do we allocate time? You know, quite often it will be a glance in an email that's sort of generic or automated, and go, no, they don't deserve my time. I'm really, really busy. I don't think I've got time to give it my attention. But then you've created, and only a small, it's not, you know, writing all these long verbose emails. It's just these small little things that you do, and changes that you make, that will capture someone's attention. Say, hey, this is something I want to read. So absolutely will increase email responses. They will return your call, because they will want to talk to you, and they will follow up meetings rather than saying, no, I've got to cancel it, or no, let's do it another day, or they will want to engage with you. And you have a much, much better understanding of the relationship dynamics. So once you start engaging with this, you can sort of pick people and go, well, I think there's a D, or they're definitely an I, they're a C. And you get to, and I know we're sort of categorizing them, but I'm just doing it for the simplicity of tonight. But it's really important, because if someone comes across, you go, well, actually, I'm not going to go up to them and touch them, and say, hey, how are you? And what did you do today? I'm going to, you know, treat them very differently than I would if I was talking to someone else. So that relationship dynamics, which is basically a foundation of communication, you become almost an expert, and the whole world just opens up in the way of, you know, talking and listening and relationships that you engage with, and you start and keep going. So communication, making sense of human behavior in an unpredictable world. We need to understand each other a lot better. And we are in a very unpredictable world, and it's a lot of uncertainty at the moment also. So using these tools, using these tips, using these resources will allow you to make a lot more sense of each other in this unpredictable world. Thank you. And here are all my details. If anyone wants to connect with me, I'd love to meet you. My website, I've got my personal email there for you guys if you wanted to email me. And in terms of social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leanne. That was really wonderful. We've had a lot of really great questions, but unfortunately we're out of time.
Oh,
so
gosh, I spoke over.
That's terrific.
It's because I'm an I.
But it's wonderful that you shared your personal details, and we will be following up with everyone who's attended tonight and share those as well. So if any of you have a burning question, Leanne, are you okay for them to email you direct?
Yeah, sure.
Because there's been some wonderful.
Yes, and this is a fascinating topic, which I absolutely love, or like you say, I'm obsessed with. So I don't want to miss any questions. So yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy for people to email them through.
Okay, so thank you very, very much for sharing what you know with us. I think I've certainly learned a lot. I know where I am on that DISC profile, and of course the burning question is, how do you quickly tell what anyone else is so you can communicate with them well? But perhaps a topic for next time.
Yeah, sure.
For all of you that have joined us tonight, thank you so much for doing so. Remember that all our events, whether they're virtual or in person, are there for you to help you with your career, to get the clarity you need, the learning you need, and actually to help you build your community and meet people that can help you along the way, or can just be good forces in your life. So thank you again, Leanne, and thank you and good night, everyone. Have a very good week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.